I'm Raja Chaudhary. The name I was born with was Ranjit Chaudhary, because that's the name of a famous king in India that my mother thought, he's going to be a famous king one day. That didn't work. But Raja was a nickname my grandmother gave me, and it stuck. Raja means king, so she had big plans too, you know. But in India, when you call a kid Raja, it's like sweetie pie, you know. It's like kuchi kuchi, you know. So my grandmother completely spoiled me, and I was the third of 3 brothers, so it was like easy to be spoiled, you know. I think that's why I've always gone my own way, because by the time they came around to me, they'd kind of given up. You know, they tried to fix my first brother, that didn't work. They kind of fixed my second brother, but by the time they came to me, my parents just said, F it, you know, he's going to be fine. Whatever happens will happen. So as a result, I ended up creative and always feeling like an outsider. You know that feeling? Yeah. And it's funny because you don't think about consciousness when you're young. You know, you think, this is the world, and it sometimes sucks, and it's sometimes interesting, you know, but mostly, if you are an outsider, what happens is that you create a kind of rich inner life. You know that feeling? You construct a new reality in your head. In fact, the greatest gift we have is our imagination. If we can construct reality just in our mind, that's enough. We don't need video, we don't need films, we don't need... Because the fantasies that occur just in your mind can take you to such wonderful places. And I think because I had I wasn't a sporty kid, so I always had to fantasize, you know, and so fantasy was the one way I could figure out the world, you know. And I was an Indian kid in Africa. All black kids, right? You know, by the time I was in, 12, 13, I was the only Indian kid in an all-black school. So, so you have to have a rich inner life, otherwise you're screwed, you know. But it was nice because growing up in Africa, you kind of taste so many different cultures. You know, my father was in the UN, so we tasted sort of expat lifestyle, you know, traveling. Then I was Indian, so we were part of the Indian community. You know, we felt like outsiders there. And then we were part of this African community, you know, and I swear until I was 8 or 9, I used to tell people I'm Nigerian or I'm Sierra Leonean, you know, that's it, you know. And, but I created a rich inner life, and that was the very important thing for me. And I think that paid off later. So my journey took me through design, and today I explore the inner world, you know, what you can call consciousness, or you can call the mind, or the human potential. That's the area I work in, you know. I wasn't a very strong kid, right? So I had to invent alternative realities, you know, to survive. You know, I was a skinny little kid until I was about 13 or 14. So the likelihood of getting beaten up was very high, you know, especially in African schools, like British schools, you know, or bullied. So I was always working out strategies to avoid being beaten, you know, and that was, you know, that gives you a fantastic imagination because you're working with people, you're getting the biggest guys to support you, you're kind of being a leader, you have to be you're always there, right? But the second part was that I looked around and the world didn't seem right. It just somehow, what we were being told, what we were being given, didn't seem like real. There was something else going on, you know, and I knew that since I was like 12, 13 at least, that there was something under this, behind all this. And I didn't think of God. I went to a Christian school, so I knew the Bible inside out. You know, I studied Latin, all that kind of crap. But something was there, a mystery, that one had to find out, you know, and that was pulling me. That always pulled me, you know. And I think that's when it started. It was just like, and I remember when I was 13, a very good friend of mine, who was much older, he was 19, he had sickle cell anemia. It kills you by 19, 21, right? And he was he taught me chess, so he was a wonderful mind, right? Great guy, and he was dying in a hospital bed. And in a place like this, mountains, up in the hills of Freetown, Sierra Leone, beautiful hill station, and a beautiful hospital, trees and birds outside. And he and I were playing chess. Next moment he's gagging and he dies, right? And everyone around is screaming and crying and, you know, and I just felt an immense peace. And it was a very strange feeling because I'm 13. I mean, what do I know about philosophy or anything? And it was my first experience of death. And literally we were playing and next moment he gagged and then his eyes rolled up and he was gone, right? But I felt something come out of him. And that was a really strange feeling. So while everybody was crying, I went outside into a beautiful place like this and I felt his spirit go into the trees. And that was the first time I ever experienced this other potential consciousness that could exist in you, you know? So those were the two things. One, I had to have a rich inner life to survive, and the other was a kind of suspicion that there was something more going on. I mean, I was always a creative person, right? Imagination, right? But I made the mistake of going into computer science when I was 17, 18, you know? I thought that's the thing to do. Computers were the next big thing. It was 1989, 88, 89, you know? I'm 58 now. So I thought I'd go into computers. I went to Canada to study. My brothers were there, so I went there. And I hated it. I hated computers, I hated science, I hated math. I was very good at it, but I didn't like it. So I came back on a holiday to Africa where my parents were still living there. And, you know, you always have to have one person who's going to initiate you into the mysteries and the wonders of life. So this very good friend of mine had a friend who was a cultivator of sensimilia, which is the finest Jamaican marijuana possible, right? In Africa. And we used to call it jamba. Jamba in Africa. It was called jamba. I mean, this is some seriously strong shit, right? And I'd never smoked before. And we got together. You know, I remember that day. It was outdoors in a courtyard like this. Bob Marley was playing Natural Mystic on the stereo. And we smoked. And suddenly, the pulse of the music, the plants, everything came alive, you know. And that's when it really hit me that there was another consciousness around, you know. So from then on, I did it for a couple of years, then I stopped. And then I did psychedelics. So I went to acid, you know, some psilocybin, MDMA, you know, I tried different things. But it was acid that took me to the other side. But what happened was that, I think that was years later, I went to architectural school, I became a designer, artist, but then something mysterious happened. I kind of had started a creative business and I screwed up. I messed the whole thing up, you know. We got bankruptcy stuff going and it was really stressful time. You know, I'd come out of architecture school and we were cutting edge, you know, we were in the multimedia rock star business, you know. It was like we were so cool, but we financially useless, you know, like. And I was 33 by this time. I lost everything and I was with a dysfunctional girlfriend who was just smoking herself silly and we were just lost, you know. I was 33. And then this shaman friend of mine, see, another guy has to come, another mysterious key person. In between, I had lots of teachers who taught me design and art and all that stuff. But the shaman guy comes along. He'd been to Goa and he comes back. And he's got all this paraphernalia stuff with him and he's beating drums. You know, he's staying in my house on the floor and he's beating stuff. And then he whips out these little blotter pads of acid, you know, little blots, right? Little paper cuts. And he said, okay, now we go. You know, so I said, all right, it's acid, I've done some before, but not this one. So we put it on our tongue, right? And I swear to God, I have never seen such psychedelic imagery. Geometry is open, universe is open, intelligence seemed to be everywhere, you know, and it lasted for like 3 days. but we took some more also, And the first thing I did when I came out of it, I broke up with that girl. Goodbye, and it was her friend, the shaman who brought it all. So it was like, ciao Bella, I can't do this anymore. I got to be free now, right? But the second thing I realized, because I'd been reading lots of books about spiritual and mystical experiences, particularly something called Kundalini, which became my go-to, right? And I remember that after the trip, I came back and I had a good friend and we were talking. And I was in London at this time, right? London. And I said, there must be a way to do this without having to take that stuff, right? There must be a way. And, and we read about it, Autobiography of a Yogi and all these, mystical states of, without medicine, right? So this was 1997. And I said, that's it, fuck it. I'm going to figure it out. And that's when the adventure began. Yeah, cool, right? I did do psychedelics for a while after, just to know, DMT type stuff and psilocybins and things like that. But now, what is it? 16 years I haven't touched a thing, because what I have experienced now is so much greater. So much. I mean, I can now give it to other people, And that's even the wildest part, is that not only can I induce it in myself, but I can give it to other people. The taste of magic, man. Let me take you a little back to that point again, right? When it happened. I moved to New York. I started studying. I learned Kriya Yoga, right, which was taught by the Yogananda people, right? I learned that. I studied Indian scriptures. I went and joined a teacher in Raja Yoga and mysticism. I took all kinds of initiations, right, for about 5-6 years, right? And nothing was happening. It was good. I was figuring things out, but I wasn't repeating that same experience, And I had my doubts. I thought, well, I might as well go the Terence McKenna route and just do 4 times a year massive trips and alter my chemistry, And that was an option. It really was, because many people I knew were on the superdose. A superdose is like 5 grams of psilocybin, or 300 micrograms of acid. It's like a bang. It's like a heavyweight boom. And you do it once in a while in a kind of ritualistic way, and you go to another dimension, and you travel, right? Or today you would do it with 5-MeO-DMT or Bufo or something like that, right? Or ayahuasca, similar. But it was, that route was available, right? I was in London, I was in New York at that time. You could do it, anything, everything was available. But I was convinced that it could happen, and I started doing mantras. Right? I started doing mantras. I didn't know what the mantras were, but they were given to me by a teacher friend of mine. And when I started doing them, the breathing of Kriya Yoga, the meditation techniques I'd learned, and the mantras together started to do something. I started seeing visions. I started seeing doors opening. And it was like, when you do the mantras, it's like a cosmic vagina opens up for you in the cosmos. It's almost like space splits and a vagina opens like a womb, and you go into it. Very strange, right? It started to happen to me. Very strange. So I had read about it, that this is what happens when you do certain tantric techniques, right, of Shakti mantra chanting. The sacred goddess, it's called, right, the goddess. And I knew that this could be a route into that. I figured that if I could get in there, right, what was being shown to me, I would find it, right? But I didn't know what it would do to me, right? So it was in September of 2006 in New York City, Upper East Side, my dog next to me. I'm sitting in my apartment in New York City, meditating, and I go on this trip. We do this thing called the Jyoti Mudra, where you close your eyes. And I was doing the mantras, and bam, it hit me, right? 23rd September 2006. It's like my birthday, it's the second birthday. I was reborn. It really was a hallelujah moment. It was like, whoa, just So then I spent, that lasted 3 to 4 days, and I was in bliss. 1,000 suns exploded in my head, an eruption of volcano up my spine, right? My heart exploded like tentacles of electric currents all through. My whole spinal cord lit up like a beam of light, like a Star Wars saber, you know. It was just like that. It was like weird, man. I was like Doctor Strange. I could, you know, my hand was sending out energy, vibrations and waves and geometries. It was like the weirdest stuff was going on for 3 days. Like, I would walk outside and the plants would start talking to me. You know, it was like unbelievable. My dog suddenly had new intelligence. I was looking at him, hello? You know, what have you got to say? And he was looking at me going, where are you now? You know, like, so I think that when that happened and I came out of it, I said, okay, this is it, fuck it. I'm going to have to figure this out, right? So I started a quest now, a new one. So this was my second breakthrough quest, right? First I have acid, then I have this boom. So later on I figured out it's called a Kundalini awakening, right? Like an eruption of this energy at the base of your spine, your third eye opens and 1,000 suns erupt and your life changes, your brain changes, your body changes, everything changes, right? And we had just gotten married, my wife and I. She was in New York with me. She got pregnant a month later, right? And she had gone to India on a business trip. She got stuck there, and we ended up moving to India from New York. I mean, just look at the serendipities and synchronicities going on here. And I had always said, I need to go to India and ask questions of all these yogis and mystics, right? I was going to go. And I planned, I would take 4 trips a year, I'd do all this stuff. Now I'm lock, stock and barrel shifted to India, right? And so I started this adventure and I met some of the most amazing teachers, right? But my approach to it was like a research scientist, you know. I was not approaching it like, oh guru, please teach me, I want to be your devotee. Nah, none of that bullshit, right? I was making videos by then, so I said, I am a filmmaker, right? And all the gurus will want to talk to me because I can make films about them, right? And I was right. I started making films about them and talking to them. And they would talk to me, give me initiations. It was wonderful, right? And I met the most amazing teachers. I filmed them. I talked to them and I learned techniques. I learned processes. I learned ways of refining and tuning. But I never thought I would start sharing it, right? I never thought I'd start sharing it. But then I got a chance to do a TED Talk in India, right? A real TED Talent Talk. And this was in 2012. And suddenly I'm on a public stage for the first time. And I'm talking about consciousness. I'm talking about Indian paths to consciousness as hacking your mind. Not as religion, not as God, but hacking your consciousness to open the door to something else, right? And it took off really well. People started listening. People started wanting me to talk about it and stuff like that. And that's how it started, you know. And so I taught my first workshops and public talks in 2015 in Delhi. And one of those talks was a talk on Kundalini and the other on opening your third eye. And the third one was the psychedelic origins of religious experience called Soma. It was the Soma. These were my 3 talks that I was very happy with. It was like cool shit. I thought, yeah, a few hundred people would watch it on YouTube. It went viral, right? 10,000, 20,000, 30,000. It was like going ding, 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 ding. Suddenly YouTube, I was getting messages from young guys saying, this is exactly what happened to me. You're explaining it like I figured it out, you know. And for the first time, I was the only guy who was talking Kundalini, Indian mysticism and psychedelics as the same thing. There was no difference in my mind. It was an altered state of consciousness, right? Yeah, you might discover some intelligence along the way, you might download some new information, but it wasn't God coming, it was you expanding towards the divine in everything, right? That's what I figured out that I wanted to do. So about 16, 17, I started teaching, right, in Delhi. And I started doing these little workshops, and it was the weirdest thing because people would come and I would do this work and I would be able to take them to exactly the same place I had been within a day. That something's happening here, right? So this was what, 5 years ago, 6 years ago it started, right? And that's how it started. I started sharing in 3 ways. One, I would talk about the nature of this altered state of consciousness, right? Psychedelic, the approach of the psychonaut, the explorer, not the religious seeker of God, you know? That, can I alter my consciousness and make my life better? Can I help the world? Can I become in harmony with nature? Can I figure out things? That was my question, right? And the second question I was asking was that, can anybody do it, right? And it started to happen. And that's how it started. That's how I started teaching, you know? So here's the thing I found out. I am a living laboratory of my own experiments, right? But I see the hunger in people to have these experiences and go to another state of consciousness, but not do it always through medicine or through drugs or through religion. You know, more gurus have exploited more women and men than anything else, you know. The guru culture has a lot to answer for, right? And those experiences of the divine have always come through a guru in some way in the Western world. Indian gurus coming over here, or Westerners going to India and becoming gurus and coming back, you know, and all you hear is exploitation stories and sexual exploitation, and, you know, and it's terrible. You know, because it became known as neo-tantra and tantric, and, you know, and women have always been abused by this kind of shit, right? Because you're vulnerable, you're open, somebody's giving you an experience and you think you owe them, you think you have to devote yourself to them, and you become a slave to them. The other side was that the psychedelic stuff was not being treated as sacred medicine, you know, because most psychedelics are sacred. You got to do it in a sacred way. When you take a plant or you take a acid or whatever you take, acid comes from ergot, right, which is a plant, a mold, right? When you take that, the ancients used to do it in a sacred way. There would be music, there would be fasting, they would eat no meat, they would do all kinds of stuff, they'd be playing music, you go into a dark place, you go into a state, the shaman holds you and guides you. We've lost that. We've kind of become urban shaman. Everybody's a fucking shaman now, you know? And that's some fucked up stuff, because if you're a shaman, that means you have been to the other side, come back, died, come back, and you can take others to the other side. So for me, my experiences were like death. I went and died, and I came back, right? And now I want to help others cross to that side. So that was the thing, was that both sides were disappointing people. I saw that in the last few years, you know. So I figured there must be a middle way. A mystical, psychedelic path that we can do without drugs, but use medicine as a tool to see it, and then develop techniques to do it yourself. That's my main core teaching right now, right? That's what I want to do. And I use tantric techniques, so mantra, breathing, and mental focus, you know? That's what I do. Well, the one thing I always tell anybody who wants to work with me is that I'm in the business of teaching you to be your own guru, right? What I discovered was that if you can wake people up quickly, the guru in them wakes up, right? Then all you got to do is be a friend, a coach, a companion, and a help in that some way. That's all you can do, because you've already been there, so they're going to go through what you've been through in their own way. It's going to be their own trip. But you are just slightly ahead, maybe, right? You're not the wise one, you know. You're not on the mountain, you know. It's all bullshit, right? You are a coach. You are a friend, you know. So what does that mean? That means when you and I meet, we meet heart to heart, right? You don't bow to me. You don't beg me to give you the beautiful medicine. We meet, and I see you, I feel your longing, and I give you the medicine, right? And then I do the initiation and the ritual and the process, and now you have the medicine. What are you going to do with it now? That's the next question, right?